this belief that the best days are already behind me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, I've passed the prime. I mean, honestly, the Lord exposed that for me at one point, you know? And it was just like, no, they're not. Like, what kind of belief does that show in God if the best days are already behind you, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Inspirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Welcome, everyone, to Season 2 of the Inspirit podcast. New season, same guest. Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Father Thomas.
Thank you.
Welcome, Anthony.
How was you guys' summer? I know a lot of exciting things, but maybe one memory that for you guys stand out as you think about the summer?
Oh, man. My summer was wild. A lot of travel. Too much travel for my taste. But the highlight was my own annual retreat.
Nice.
Yeah.
The highlight would have been my retreat, which was not the same as your retreat, Father, although we were in the same place. We were up at Mundelein. We were doing I was receiving the spiritual exercises. Father Thomas was giving the spiritual exercises.
Yeah, 30 days, right?
Yeah, 30 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I got to be in India, so it was a lot of fun for the summer. Got to be with family, visit a lot of friends, so really good time. So a lot of memories for us. During
this is a good time to make a plug for the 30-day.
That's true.
If you want to make a 358 or 30-day retreat, go
Contact,
to the website.
What's the website? AmorisChristi.org.
You'll find your way.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
If you're watching this, you probably know who we are.
No, but I guess a lot of good memories for both of you, for me as well, during the summer. And I thought that's what we could talk about today, our memories, how we kind of engage with it, the way we interact with our memories as well. So just to open up, Chris, I know you've been reading some about, John of the Cross and everything about memories, but how do we kind of approach our memories?
Yeah, I think I'll start by framing it in the context of this current year. So, of course, we're still in the Jubilee year of hope. And hope is actually something that figures very prominently in the work of John of the Cross when he's talking about memory. So, of course, we have different faculties of our soul. We have intellect, will. We also have memory. Other theologians and thinkers will sometimes group memory as a power of the intellect, but John of the Cross, and it's something very novel to his work, teases out memory very specifically. And then he says that each of the three theological virtues purify one of those three faculties. So faith purifies the intellect, love purifies the will, and hope purifies memory. And it was such a novel concept. It was so interesting to me. Of course, he's dealing with very deep, mystical, spiritual realities, but these are realities that also touch our everyday lives. And of course, everybody is called to contemplation in the mystical life ultimately. But here on our podcast, we're touching very, we might call like secular, day-to-day realities as well. So it was very interesting. It really gripped me. And of course, in the context of the Jubilee year, reflecting on hope all the more. So basically, the basic premise, the basic idea is that as a person is moving more and more towards union with God, and is sort of having all these attachments to bad things first, but then even to good things, sort of burning off as they approach the fire of God, and being transformed in that the memory also has to undergo a kind of purification, a transformation in God. So we know from just the context, and of course, Father Thomas, you would certainly know from in the context of spiritual direction, that a lot of times memory has this way of holding us back from really having hope for our future. I don't know if maybe you've seen that personally firsthand. And
yeah, well, we were talking about the 30-day, and you just went through the 30-day. It's such a big part of the spiritual exercises, right? I mean, you're praying with the life of Jesus, especially starting with the second week. You go through the life of Jesus, starting from the Annunciation and all the way through. So it's the life of Jesus, and yet inevitably it ties in with your own life history, and Jesus's life story sanctifies your own. So that's a big part. I mean, as you're healed of I don't want to say healed of different memories. That's not the right way to put it, but maybe you're just like
the pain of the memories.
Yeah, the pain of the memories, and just wrong, distorted interpretations of what happened, which when they're imbued with faith and you see them anew, it starts rebuilding everything that was standing on the foundation of those wrong interpretations of your life history.
Right.
That's the power.
And it might help in this context just to offer a spot definition for hope as we understand it theologically. So hope, of course, can also be a natural human emotion. But in the context of faith, hope is essentially the confidence and the certainty that I will obtain this difficult good. And of course, it's always situated ultimately towards God and towards heaven and beatitude, that like, no matter the difficulty, I will reach the salvation that God's promised me.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that acknowledges the difficulty.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is precisely what makes it hope, because otherwise it would be just simple desire, really, like just like a longing for any good. Like if a good's not difficult to obtain, it's like I can feel the sort of the pain of not having received it yet, but like I wouldn't necessarily call it hope.
Yeah,
like,
or just even like positivity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
Naive
like,
optimism.
Yeah, like naive optimism.
But just to sparse it out a little bit, when you talk about, purification of our memories and, like you're talking about a healing of memories, just how do we kind of approach that? Is that our relationship with the memories, or is it like, obviously it's not getting rid of the memory itself, because the memory is something real that's happened to us. So how do we, when we say this purification of memories, how do we kind of understand that?
Yeah, it's helpful, again, in light of hope, because hope relates to achieving this difficult good. So what happens is hope is something that looks towards the future. It's sort of the future coming into the present. Memories are, things that have happened in my past, as you mentioned. When those memories are locked up in a lot of pain or bondage, or, we might say, like, use the word trauma, or like whatever personal difficulties like that I might have experienced in my past, that can lead me to a false belief system, or when I look at the future, I just say it's too difficult. It's too difficult to obtain. So that operates against hope. So in a lot of ways, this healing, if we're relating it to virtue, hope is sort of coming in and giving that word of encouragement that says it is possible. Like there is more that's waiting. There is a good that's attainable, no matter the odds and difficulties. But then practically, we kind of have to parse out, I think, the spiritual sort of disciplines of prayer, where we talk about things like healing of memories, but then even sort of like more psychological means like counseling, therapy, like sometimes that's necessary, for those painful memories. But
yeah, memories, one of the things that can happen like in our life history is that you go through a particular experience, but then you sort of take a lesson from it.
Yeah.
Right. And not consciously even, but it sort of rewires your understanding of just life, or what it means to live, or what it means to be in relationship with other people, or what it means to trust or not to trust, or to protect yourself, and so on. So sometimes an individual experience, I think, an individual experience can just pretty dramatically alter your life. Now it's not the as we know, it's never the event itself, but it's the way in which we interpret the event and the way in which we interpret life post event.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that I've seen this, my old way of understanding the world is no longer true.
Yeah.
I have to adjust it. And that adjustment is typically a good thing. I mean, that's what we mean by learning, really. Learning is not just like reading from a book, right? I mean, learning is you go through life, you have experiences, and then you're constantly calibrating like your map, your understanding of the world, right? But the problem is that sometimes when an event is particularly painful or traumatic, it can like rupture the whole understanding of the world, and in such a way that even many positive experiences after that don't seem to be able to repair it.
Yeah. I think, it reminds you of John Henry Newman, who, he talks about our conscience, like when we know what is right, what is good, what is wrong, and what is bad. He says that memory plays an important role in the formation of our understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And I think, but you're saying as well that, there's a rewiring that takes place, right? So are we also saying that, is it possible to reverse that rewiring with, inviting Jesus into our memories and this healing of memories? Or like just from you guys' experience, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't want to oversimplify it either, right? Because it's like, I think it's a both and. Because let's say, for example, I took a bad lesson, so to speak, from a particular event in my life history. With God's grace, I can begin to see that memory differently. I can see the ways in which the Lord was present with me, even at that time, though I didn't know it. I can begin to see how it fits into the larger scheme of what the Lord is doing in my life, which gives me hope and a sense of direction and all that stuff. All of that can happen. But quite frankly, I mean, there's also an entire edifice that's built upon it sometimes, And so it can take time for that to like propagate through. But
I think even recognizing that, there's something that needs to change, that is probably
huge.
And a possibility for healing.
Yeah, the possibility that hope brings in that memory too. So
some of it, in other words, I guess another way to put it is that some of it is the changing of habits too. Like some of it is like catharsis or something like that, like a healing of that memory itself, which is always like a big release.
Yeah.
But then often after the fact, you realize, wow, I have all these habits of thinking that are based on that. Habits of behaving, habits of pushing people away and things like that now have to be like reworked. So it's like, it's both. I think having both is probably a good balance.
And just like talking about a little more, why do you guys think that memory plays such an important role in how we take action or behave in the future? Or is that just how we're made? We are persons of experience, that we act based on our previous experience. Is that what you think it is, or?
Yeah, I think in some sense it's innate. It's almost instinctual. Like we're wired to recognize patterns in things and to kind of go off of prior experience in order to, when we look ahead to what lies ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what makes you wise, right? Like you don't keep repeating the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't think it would be. What we're talking about here, what the Lord does, is different than just forgetting.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's not necessarily helpful. I mean, that wouldn't be helpful. Like if you got, like, let's say, imagine if you were trying to do a business and you were just too trusting, meaning you trusted without good grounds for trusting people. And then you get cheated and then you just forget and you make the same mistake again.
Right.
Like,
we would call that naive.
Yeah. I mean, at best, that would be naive. Because if you have repeated opportunities to learn and you still don't, that's worse than being naive.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do want that even the negative experiences, perhaps especially the negative experiences, to shape your understanding. But there are some typical problems that happen with it, at least like when we think about it from a psychological perspective. One is like there's a scope creep. It keeps generalizing more and more and more what situations and people this applies to the point where you're now applying it to people that are actually very trustworthy, but you're not able to trust them.
Right. We have a certain negativity bias too.
That's a great point.
Like negative experiences are going to stand out more in our memories than positive ones, and this has been shown by psychology.
Yeah, even when you get feedback, like you get
remember the one bad
one bad thing a person
exactly.
says versus like the 100 good things a person says. So
right.
It's very.
Now, what's interesting is we've been talking about bad memories, but as we're talking in the context of what John of the Cross is saying and about hope and union with God, what's interesting is he also points to how good memories can also hold us back. In the case of bad memories, we might say in kind of spiritual terms, we might call it a certain bond, like it can have a certain bondage or affect a certain bondage on us. But then good memories can also cause a certain, we might say bondage, but really an attachment. And you see this a lot with nostalgia, I think, which originally was classified as a kind of psychological sickness
really?
in the 1800s, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and I don't think it is anymore. But, if you imagine how, like we might be talking about, it could be any number of things. I think you could feel nostalgia for just about anything, but I don't know, like sports team 10 years ago was just so much better back then. You say, oh, remember the days when like,
or even in the church, we do this, like back in the day, the church was.
Yeah, always. Well, and even in scripture, Jesus says, with the new wine, they'll say the old is good. He's kind of hearkening to that nostalgia that's in all of us. That
I miss the internet from the 90s.
Yeah. Or like, oh, remember when video games were good, like, 20 years ago.
You're thinking about dial-up?
Not that part specifically, but the forums.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But, we always have this tendency in us to look back on the past. And when we have an inordinate attachment to it, then we'll say, oh, the old was just better. Or the old days were better. Remember the good old days. And like there are entire businesses that thrive on this, like
thrive on nostalgia?
On nostalgia, yeah. Like
Kodak or?
No, like I feel like movies, like how many Lion Kings have we seen now? It's like Lion King 1, live action Lion King Mufasa. It's like,
or, like channels like TCM, Turner Classic Movies. I don't know if that's copyrighted, but like their whole channel is like the TV channel is they show old movies. Or people will talk about like having nostalgia for the 80s or nostalgia for the 60s or like, there's, even retirement communities that'll like dress up the communities to look like, the good old days.
There could be a real malady there. I've found myself in a similar trap at times where I'm like, not consciously, but unconsciously, this belief that the best days are already behind me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, I've passed the prime. Like there's a weird thing that can happen there. And sometimes, honestly, the Lord exposed that for me at one point, and it was just like, no, they're not. Like, what kind of belief does that show in God if the best days are already behind you,
Right.
Yeah.
God only gives us better. He only moves. It's like a linear progression. It only goes from good to better. And then even in Revelation,
exponential.
Exponential. But in Revelation, when Jesus says, I make all things new, like he's always renewing. He doesn't throw away the old, he fulfills it. But at the same time, there's this newness with the Lord where the greatest is still ahead.
Yeah.
There's always more.
So then, like you guys, we talked about, the challenges with nostalgia, but at the same time, we want to be aware that we have good memories as well. So how do we kind of, remember the past with gratitude, but at the same time not be attached to it? So how do we kind of approach that? We have good memories, we want to remember them with gratitude, but at the same time, we don't want to hold on to it. What does that look like?
My thought from maybe from a spiritual direction point of view is, so like a person can come into a retreat or a spiritual direction and feel the need to just like dig up all of the past, and just all the issues and challenges and mistakes and sins and everything just needs to come out. But there's a real danger there because of everything that you're talking about from St. John of the Cross and everything from the gospel, which is that like, okay, first of all, do we believe in forgiveness? Is this like a real thing? Is it like you've been forgiven for past sins or not? So that's part of it. I think the way that I generally approach it is that if something is coming up for you now, then it's no longer just something of your past. It's something in your present, right? So like concretely, let's say that let's say I'm teaching a class, and then I'm teaching a class and I feel nervous as I'm teaching the class or something like that in a given situation. And then I go to spiritual direction or my own prayer and I'm thinking about something that happened to me a while ago. And to me, it's like, that's no longer something of the past. It's something in my present because that memory is like surfacing for me. Wow. I don't know if that's the best way to differentiate, but at least I feel like that can prevent you from just unnecessarily going and trying to like feel like you need to fix the past somehow.
Yeah.
You know.
So are you saying also just allow the memories to come as it is and then interact
that's such an easier way to say it.
And then interact with it as it comes, and that's how it becomes a present.
But what I'm also saying is that when it does come up, the perspective with which we should engage it is that I'm engaging it because it's something in my present consciousness.
Right, receive it as it comes versus like going digging and looking and searching and trying to.
Yeah, but also like I'm not trying to go back and fix the past.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no need to do that. You know, I mean, especially when it comes to sin, like it's really been forgiven. What I'm maybe doing is like whatever is coming up for me now in the present, that disturbance or unrest or whatever I'm trying to bring to the Lord. Yeah. I don't know.
That's a great point, because even like, and I know for myself, like, you know, there's so much regret that comes along with looking back at your past sins. But, you know, when the priest says, I absolve you of your sins, then, you know, it's done. It's like
either it's real or it isn't.
Yeah. You know, and so that's where I guess we practice faith in that moment.
I also believe we have, there's certain ways of seeing if I have a sort of unhealthy attachment to memories. Memories are obviously really precious. They're integral to our experience. And like you mentioned before, Father Thomas, like we don't want to just be intentionally forgetful, but there's a kind of holy forgetfulness where I don't allow the past to hold me back. And I think that's ultimately what John of the Cross is referring to. But I think you can see certain ways that I'm unhealthily attached. Like, you know, I was thinking about this recently when I saw like I don't remember, it was a picture or video of Pope Leo driving by in the Pope Mobile, and like everyone's phones go up trying to record him as he passes by. There's nothing wrong with that intrinsically, but I was just thinking how like everyone's trying so hard to preserve the memory. Everyone's like, you know, we have so many devices on hand. I mean, now they're even like, you know, putting cameras in glasses, so it's like you can record literally everything at any time. You know, photos, videos. And of course, like we want to preserve those good memories and look back on them, but it can go too far where it becomes like FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. Like I've got to preserve everything. I got to hold on to everything. There might actually be some things, and it's going to sound very odd, like there might actually be some things that you don't need to remember. And that's that sort of detachment, the holy forgetfulness.
Like people's birthdays.
Yeah. Has this happened to you?
I'm just kidding. Making excuses for myself. No, but that's honestly, that's a great point. I mean, like, I mean, we can relate, right, to the feeling of like, I got to capture everything. Mm-hmm. I want to record everything. And then I remember the first time I went to Rome, I believe I was a college student, and I initially, you know, was taking pictures of every single thing, right? Because I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Picture. And after a while, I realized like I'm literally missing out on this moment because I'm thinking about how I can hold on to it for the future, you know? And maybe it's just one of those things where we have to have a healthy sense of like, it's kind of like sand in your hand, you know? You are holding it, but you're also aware that it's slipping through your fingers. And you have to be willing to allow that to happen. Well,
and it's sort of like, you know, if you're constantly trying to preserve every single moment all the time, you're sort of doing, like we talk about how God speaks to us through our everyday experiences. I think in a way you're almost doing to God what we sometimes do to each other, where you're thinking about the next thing you're going to say as the person speaking. You're not actually being present to that person and what that person is saying, the moment, exactly. Yeah. Instead, you're focused on what am I going to say next, or like, how do I rebut what they're, you know, so you take yourself out of the moment. And sometimes like God is actually speaking very powerfully through the things that are happening in our everyday lives. But if we're constantly removing ourselves from the moment by trying so hard to hold on to it, like we can actually miss it.
And just putting things in historical perspective, until, I don't know what, the last, obviously not more than 200 years, like prior to that, for all of human history, how did people hold on to memories, you know?
Journaling, I guess. I don't know. You write down your experiences of it.
Yeah, I mean, like you couldn't just go and take all these. I mean, you think about how many pictures the average person has right now. I can't even imagine what that number would be like.
And how many times do we actually go back and look into these pictures too, right? It's like,
yeah, but it's like you think about the fact that that's all just so recent. And people have cherished the past always, for all time. But
and we had a professor, I remember years ago, who pointed out from a kind of historical archaeological perspective how it's been shown that people's memories were actually very, very well developed prior to the modern era, because they had no other option. So they had to preserve things through memory because they didn't have another way to preserve it. But as we've developed more and more tools, and actually let me say a little bit more about that just as an example. Like a lot of these epic poems like the Odyssey, the Iliad, Beowulf, like these were recounted orally. Even the scriptures, like our Bible, was originally recounted orally. And then, of course, it was written down later. But it was passed down for centuries, if not millennia, just through people recalling it by rote. Because they didn't have another choice. But we see this a lot with like neuroscience and psychology, that as we develop means of, for instance, like being able to remember, like record things, like whether in a book or on a phone or in a movie, our brain doesn't need to exercise itself as much in that area. So it's been shown like over time that like we don't need to use our memory as much today as we did back then.
Yeah, or we might use it for other things. But I mean, and that's not necessarily a problem. I think the only advantage of using your memory as opposed to writing something down or recording it is that your memory automatically can be like those hands holding on sand. There's a sort of natural cleanup process, like some things will fade away, some things will go away.
Yeah, and so maybe also the way we interact with our memories changes as well as we're using, technology and so on, but so then how do we kind of how do we kind of use our memories then to then shape our future? How are we supposed to, we receive it as it comes, look back with gratitude, but should we not focus on memories or, making memories or, is that a cliche, or what do you guys think?
I mean, in all this, even with what we were just saying about memory, it's a good thing. Yeah. Like fundamentally, it's like knowledge. Like knowledge is fundamentally a good thing that enriches our human experience. So it's not something that we want to throw away. And in general, even in the spiritual life, like we don't ever want to like throw away or switch off some elements of our human experience.
Wise. How true.
Yeah. So like with memory, it's the same thing. We don't want to just toss them out as unimportant. But I think that there's a certain, well, first of all, when it pertains to God, and this is really just taking from John of the Cross, we don't want anything to compromise on advancing that union with God. So if it's a bad memory that's holding us back, we turn to the Lord for healing. If it's a good memory holding us back, we turn to the Lord and ask for detachment, really. But whatever the case is, we don't want anything to compromise on that. Yeah. So, we invite the Lord in, we ask him to be present to us in it, to show how it relates to our current relationship with him and our future with him. But at the end of the day, if it's something we need to let go, we ask for the grace to let go. Mm-hmm. Letting go doesn't necessarily mean forgetting, but not holding on to it tightly as something that we're afraid to lose.
That's great. Yeah.
But then when it pertains to other things in life, it can get a little more complex. Like, do you remember what you learned in high school? How much do you remember of your high school education at this point, right? Because a lot of times it's framed around like utility. Like, even with language learning, if you study 5 languages and you only use 2, chances are you're only going to remember the 2 that you use. So it's sort of like habit, discipline. Unfortunately, we are not like computers that can perfectly preserve everything that has ever been input into us.
But that's where I'm saying that's perhaps the advantage of natural memory, is that there is a process of letting go and forgetting that's sort of built into us.
Right.
If you think about it from the perspective of God's design, obviously, like you said, memory is super important, both personally and collectively, because we're a church, ever ancient, ever new. Tradition as Catholics is super important. And yet, even with all that, he gave us memories that seem to fade, that let go of things, both personally and collectively.
Yeah.
I think that if you do a deep dive into history, for example, of the church, and you go into too much detail, you can get stuck there. Anybody who's done enough scholarly work knows that. It's like, whoa, there's all these little differences and nuances of perspective and all this stuff from the fathers and everything. But you kind of have to have a healthy forgetfulness where you see the broad strokes and the trends that are emerging over time. Do you know what I mean?
And I think that granularity comes from that same thing we were talking about earlier. It's like the anxiousness to hold on.
Right.
So it's like memory is sort of this natural mechanism in us, individually and collectively, to preserve.
Yeah, to pick up and to let go.
Right.
And
it gives us a security, right? A false sense of security that probably, rather than facing the uncertainty in front of us, and I think that's what many times the nostalgia does as well. But,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
And that clinging on, like what you're saying, like that, it's like rather than simply preserving for the benefit of all, it's like we're clinging on out of like fear maybe, or it could be other things too, I'm sure. But like it's like we have to try and hold on to everything. We have to grasp it. Yeah. And that grasping is never a good thing spiritually.
But grasping is easier to do than letting go and facing what's ahead of you, right? And that's where I think the virtue of hope plays such an important role, because you don't have to be afraid
to let go.
Because of the hope and the certainty of what's ahead of you.
I have friends who are getting up in years and family members, and not in any dramatic ways, but just in little ways. Like, you see signs of natural human aging. People forget the name of something or some person they met. And I've been thinking about this more, about how, old age, actually this is something my spiritual director passed on to me years ago. He said, old age is meant for contemplation. And he said, so start practicing now, because it takes a long time. But it's true. Like in contemplation, it's very much about being present to God as he, reveals himself right in that moment. In a certain way, it's nice to know that we're almost wired for that, because at a certain point, the body's just going to start naturally letting go of the past, and you don't have a choice but to be present to the present. So in that way, I think we can actually experience blessedness even in our forgetting things, because in faith and in hope, we can take it as true that what lies ahead, what's in front of us and what lies ahead, is better. That it's actually like everything we've experienced so far is so good. We can look at it with gratitude, but what's ahead is still better. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that's a good place to end for us. I think we've interacted with the idea of memory pretty extensively and talked quite a bit of how we, look back with the past with gratitude, let memories come as they are, but there's always more, and there's always hope ahead for each one of us. So thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of the Inspirit Podcast Season 2. We're back.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inspirit Podcast. Inspirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.